Here we go.
Good morning from California. Good afternoon, depending upon where you are. And I think a couple of our panelists are joining us from Europe. So good afternoon to them. This is Jeremy Martin here at the Institute of the Americas, Vice President of Sustainability. And we're very happy to continue with our virtual panels and virtual events. And today we will discuss Colombia. We're almost exactly 1 year to the day from when the Institute convened an oil and gas energy roundtable in Bogota last year. In fact, it was on 29th and 30th of October last year. And here we are 1 year later, and I think there's a lot to talk about, and we're very happy to focus on two specific, so to speak, areas of the oil and gas sector and the energy sector in Colombia, M&A and social risk management. And the Institute of the Americas is very happy to co-host this session today in this virtual panel with control risks. Thank you to Raul Gallegos and his team. And we're also very happy to have with us Jose Luis Manzano, the chairman of Integra Capital, and Integra Capital has kindly sponsored today's panel. We thank Jose Luis for his support and all his team, Javier Alvarez and Carmela and everyone. Thank you for that. Jorge Milanese is also joining us. He's with Sproule, Latin America, and he's part of our Energy Steering Committee. And Marianna Boza is a partner at Brigard Urrutia, a well-known law firm in Colombia. And good to see you. I think you were in person with us last year in Bogota, Marianna, but great to have you on the panel today in the virtual format. And absolutely last but not least, Tony Hayward, who is somebody you may have heard about once or twice, particularly in the last few weeks. He has now got the wonderful opportunity to, quote unquote, return to Colombia. Part of what we'll talk about today is absolutely one of the major activities and one of the major deals that happened and sort of just pushed us towards adding this theme to the topic today, to the panel today. Tony is the executive chairman of Glencore International, and he's soon to be the chairman of what I think is called Colombia Onshore. Is that right, Tony? The new company?
Name yet to be, call it Newco for now. We'll announce the name in the next few weeks, actually. So, Colombia Newco.
Okay, not to put you on the spot right out of the box, but well, and I also want to make sure and note two things. Jose Luis Manzano is also a member of the board of directors of the Institute of the Americas, and Tony Hayward was I think back when he managed Colombia for BP, when Tony was upstream director at BP, he was on the board of directors of the Institute of the Americas. And for those of you who know us, you know the La Jolla Conference, and you hopefully saw Tony give a keynote speech at the La Jolla Conference a few years back. So with that, I'm going to happily turn the microphone over to Jose Luis Manzano, who will chair and moderate today's panel. We've got a great set of topics. I invite all of you to use the Q&A function later. We'll go through the panel's remarks and questions for the panel at the beginning, and then I'll come back on and moderate the Q&A from the audience, and we'll also slide in a polling question at that point. So, without any further ado, thanks everyone who's out there. Thanks for joining us today for this discussion. Jose Luis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you for the opportunity. This is a fantastic panel. So it should have been you the one chairing the panel. Shows once more time the commitment of the Institute of the Americas to the Colombia development of their energy sector, and shows that we have not given up with the virus. We're fighting, we're working every day, taking care, we're careful, but here we are. Without more, I don't need to explain who the panelists are. They are absolutely well recognized in the energy sector and in Latin American business. So I think I'll pass it to Raul to put kind of a framework, and then we'll go to ask the question to the protagonists of the sector, which are our other three panelists today. So Raul, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the intro, and certainly thank you to the Institute and to Jeremy for helping put this together with control risks. I'm going to use two brief slides because I'm going to be talking about social risk and what we in control risk call conflict footprint risk in Colombia. And these are risks that anybody looking to do business in the extractives in Colombia, and particularly in the oil and gas sector, needs to take into consideration. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about what us at Control Risk have been doing over the past year in these two regards. And if we can move to the first slide, please. We have created what we call the IRIS Social risk index. And what that means is that this index gives us a sense of the likelihood that protest activity, blockages activity can happen in a particular jurisdiction in Colombia. The index we put together includes 14 variables from the economic to the security front, presence of armed actors, poverty, education, etc., and covers all 1,100 plus municipalities in the country. So what the index does is it gives us a rating of the likelihood that that type of activity can happen, and it goes from very low, low, medium, high, and extreme. Now, I've taken the 9 assets being auctioned right now by Ecopetrol to get a sense, and I've run them through our index to get a sense of what those municipalities look like. And the good news is that, as you can see from the slide, a vast majority of them are either considered medium or low social risk. So that gives us sort of a picture of what the likely social risks are at the local level. On the national level, we have a broader sort of risk picture over the next couple of years, which will focus on political risks, primarily because the government hasn't shown an inclination or the ability or intent to actually defend the extractive sector, defend fracking, for instance. And you are seeing progressive politicians gain ground and will gain more ground over time in Colombia. From the social perspective, because of COVID and after COVID, you're going to see more protests, more anti-extractive activity, but a lot of complaint over jobs and insecurity, if you will. And from the security perspective, obviously, we are going to see armed actors gain additional ground, and drug trafficking and illegal mining will continue to be a concern over time. So that's just to give you a sense. You know, we have been helping companies essentially assess what it means socially for them at the local level. If we move to the next slide and we essentially look at what the conflict footprint is, what that means is when you buy an asset or when you control an asset or have operations in Colombia, what, if any, links or ties or interaction with illegal armed groups has that asset had over time? And also what relationship with the armed forces as well. In Colombia, unlike in many other countries, I'm sure you know, companies can actually sign agreements with the military or the police, financial agreements, so that those forces can directly protect your assets in sort of risky areas. Now, the problem over time has been that aside from any instances of companies being extorted by illegal actors, these established relationships with the military limit how much control you as a company have about how those resources, financial resources, are used, and what the military does in order to sort of address security issues. That opens up a lot of risk for companies regarding human rights issues, regarding corruption issues. So what we've done at Control Risk is advise companies on how to manage those relationships, how to manage those contracts, including clauses, anti-corruption clauses, human rights clauses. But I think over time, the risk is that with the rise of more progressive politicians, what we're going to see is both the transitional justice system, which comes from the peace agreement with the FARC, but also the ordinary justice system, meaning the Attorney General's office, will continue to explore perceived wrongdoing in those areas, to see if companies have had ties with these groups, to see if the company money has in some way been involved in military wrongdoing. So again, a lot of what this means for the oil sector is we need to do our homework. We need to do necessary due diligence work, understand what our relationship as a company and as an asset has been with these actors in the future, because these are issues that will have important reputational and legal repercussions. We've already seen companies that have been accused in the US of having confirmed ties with paramilitaries, for instance. So this type of activity we see politically taking more traction, gaining more traction over time. So I'll leave it at that. Obviously, we can have more questions later, and I can take additional questions offline in the future. But I think that Colombia is a fantastic investment opportunity. The risks are manageable, but it is important to do our homework in this respects. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Raul. I think with that, we can move to the questions. And obviously, the general purpose of the panel, which is see the status of the oil and gas industry, what we should expect in the near future in terms of investment, is under the umbrella of the risk and risk evaluation, risk attenuation. So I will join the two first questions and I'll put the two first questions to the three panelists because of the nature of the question. One is how Colombia rank in the M&A landscape in South America, how you see it, what has happened and what you think will happen in the near future. And the second one, which is what are the factors being considered by companies deciding to come into Colombia or not to come into Colombia to do their investment. With an addition, in the case of Tony, whatever he can share with us of the recent activity he has been involved. So there's a lot of expectation on that. So two questions for the three of you and three for Tony, just to start so you guys get the floor. Who wants to go ahead? Jorge?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, happy to do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Look, Colombia has always been a beacon in terms of M&A in Latin America. Just to put a little bit of perspective into this, in a normal year, Latin America sees around 10 to 15 transactions over $10 million. This is something that has been happening throughout the cycles and throughout the different situations in the industry. Just this year, we have seen 4, probably 5 transactions just in Colombia. In a normal year, Colombia receives around 2 transactions or 3 transactions in Latin America, which is very stable over time. And that gives you a very good snapshot on how much the country is appreciated, particularly for foreign direct investment. So with any company that you talk about M&A businesses in Latin America, if you are not in the region, in most of the cases, the only country they want to hear about is Colombia. And that is a very good reason to vouch for the very good job that the authorities and the industry in general has done in Colombia. Because the country as a whole has been able to be very stable, very reliable and predictable, has put together a reasonable and very progressive set of rules on even in the fiscal area and in the legal area. And the industry in Colombia is very well trained. All the workforce is available. All the services are available. We have in Colombia a network of pipelines that are also a very positive factor when you consider and evaluate a transaction in Colombia. That is in terms of how Colombia ranks. So I would say very, very, very high. In terms of the factors, normally when companies are looking at an investment in another country, you can put things in kind of in 2 buckets. Everything that is below ground, so that is a geology, resources, and everything that is above ground. In terms of below ground, Colombia ranks very high as well. The geology is very well known. The country has had oil and gas activity for over 100 years now. So the way of conducting operations in Colombia is very well known to the companies, and that is not kind of an issue of a problem like in other places. Information is available, and even for new basins, there is always at least some initial information that companies can use in order to do a very good assessment of the opportunity. Above ground, Raul already talked about some of the things to consider. But in general, when you compare Colombia with other countries in Latin America, all the above ground factors rank very, very well. The country has been very, I would say, even imaginative in the ways of attracting investment, and several of the initiatives of the regulator, the ANH, Agencia Nacional de Hidrocarburos, have been copied by other countries. Lately, they have announced something that for me is genius. I mean, normally when you run a bid round at the government level, there are several requirements that are put forward in order to try to decide what are the companies that can be qualified for these investments. Just recently, ANH, the regulator, has announced what they call the Little League or the B League. So a set of bid rounds that are tailored for small or startup companies. And that is something that you don't see in other parts, I would say even in other parts of the world, and gives you a very good example of how Colombia is making everything that they can in order to attract investment and continue having oil and gas investments in the country. So I stop here so the other panelists can have a chance to also answer these questions.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Tony, I think we'll go to you. For you, or three, whatever you can tell us of your activity and the rest.
Well, okay, let me start with that. You know, I have a long history in Colombia. I was leading the BP's Colombian efforts back in the early 90s. And I have been involved one way or another with Colombia ever since then. And what is very interesting is that the oil and gas industry has had a long history of significant value creation in Colombia over the last 30 years. Back in the 90s, it was driven very much by the majors. But over the last 10 or 15 years, it's been led by smaller independent companies. But nonetheless, the country enjoys a very flourishing private sector. And there are half a dozen sizable independents in Colombia that are enjoying varying degrees of success. You know, putting aside 2020, if you look at the last decade, a lot of value has been created through oil and gas activity in Colombia. So why is that? I think the first thing is that, of course, the resource is very attractive. It's conventional, it has low break-evens. So break-even for most oil reservoirs in Colombia today is sort of $30 a barrel. It's also characterized by short cycle investments. So you can flex your capital investment to reflect the macro environment. And I think thirdly, and increasingly important in the sector, is the barrels are characterized by a moderate to low carbon footprint. So the resource base is good, first thing. The second thing is that the regulatory framework is effective, it works. As Jorge has already mentioned, there is a very effective regulator in the ANH, which is increasingly doing some quite creative things to stimulate activity. The rule of law works in Colombia. There is the respect for property rights, it works. And finally, certainly within the sector, there are no significant anti-bribery and corruption issues. So if you take it in the round, the regulatory framework in Colombia is effective and it provides the environment for business to invest. The third point I would say is that security is manageable. It's a lot more manageable today than it was 30 years ago. And whilst I listen to Raul's concerns about a possible increase, I do think overall, over a run of many years, the overall direction in Colombia is very significantly positive. And then finally, on the sort of social and community issues, it can clearly be very challenging. And all of us who've worked in Colombia have faced challenges of different sorts from time to time. For me, the issue is this is an area you really need to focus on. You need to be in the detail. So you need the right attention to detail, you need the right resources thrown at it, and you need to invest the right time and money to deal with it. This is something that the leadership of whatever entity you're talking about cannot outsource to someone else. It's the principal task of the leaders of Colombian E&P companies to manage the above ground risks. They don't need to worry about the below ground risks. But if you can manage the above ground risks, which clearly many people have demonstrated they can, then it can be a great place to invest. And finally, I would say, just in terms of the recent transaction, we think we are acquiring a fantastic business. Oxy Colombia has been a flagship business in the Oxy world for 30 years. I think it's clear that in different circumstances, Occidental probably would not be a seller, but they are refocusing their business back into the US and working to restore their balance sheet. So they are. And we think we bought a great business, and it's characterized by the things that I talked about. Conventional resources, lots of opportunity. We think we can grow the company quite significantly over the next 3 to 5 years. We see a lot of opportunity across the portfolio. It's a full cycle portfolio. There are incremental production opportunities, there are incremental development opportunities, there are satellite exploration opportunities, and obviously in Putumayo, there is new greenfield exploration opportunity. And the portfolio captures all of that. So we're very excited about the prospects and are looking forward to, frankly, investing more in the business than the current owners of the business probably would have been able to do over the next 2 to 3 years. We will increase our capital investment significantly versus what Occidental was planning.
Thank you very much, Tony. Very open answer. I will move to the next one for you, Marianna, because I believe you are the expert. If you can comment with us the changes on the royalties, the split of the royalties, the dynamic within the municipalities, the national government. If you see any risk of revisions of royalties between government or companies, or the discussion the politician will be satisfied just discussing how to allocate today's royalties. And then if you can broaden Tony's reference to dealing with communities.
Thank you very much, and so happy to hear from all my co-panelists how Colombia is full of opportunity, and if possible, I would like to have a comment later on that, because there are 3 amazing opportunities going on right now in respect to PPAs, the bidding processes for conventionals, bidding process for unconventionals, and of course the Ecopetrol round. But in respect to your question, it's important. When we refer to royalty and we brought this topic to this conversation, it was related to social risk. And is that a company can have all the permits required to exercise activities in Colombia. This is a concession contract and environmental license. But if a company do not have the community support, it will result in projects being delayed, suspended, or banned. So we enter to talk about something that we call social license, which is which we consider existing when a project has the ongoing approval of a local community and other stakeholders. So it talks about legitimacy of the project and trust. Absence of legitimacy results in rejection. When you have legitimacy and you have credibility, you have acceptance. And if you have both of them and also trust from the community, then you have the approval. And that's quite important. So why we talk about the social license and the social risk to enter into discussion of the royalty? Because in 2011 in Colombia, we have an amendment of the royalty system that changed the way the royalties had been distributed traditionally in Colombia, and that we assume, we as consultant, and I'm pretty sure Raul agrees with me, resulted in kind of disapproval by the communities. And this change was related that before 2011, 80% of the royalty were allocated to the producing territories. But in 2011, due to the reform, the royalty was distributed more evenly across the country and not necessarily allocated to the producing regions. That, if you take consideration timing, that reform was in 2011, enforced in 2012, and starting 2013 and 2014, we had in Colombia the starting of the popular consultation. That is something that we had to deal 4 years with different case law decision, very contradictory since 2014 to 2018, when finally the Colombian Constitutional Court ruled that a local referendum, so popular consultations that were banning mining and oil extraction, cannot halt projects. This is the conclusions were that the country's subsoil is national property and cannot be restricted by local authorities. And therefore, the national government, however, cannot exercise sole control over extractive projects, and Congress must pass a regulation, this is a law, as soon as possible, in effect, to regulate the coordination and concurrence principles that cause this particular deal. So we are in the process. So what happened? So we have a wave of environmental focus, anti-mining, anti-oil and gas referendums, so popular consultations. Mainly, we know in respect to mining, La Colosa, Anglo-Gold's project that was banned and by the community because of the referendum. And we also have the case in the oil and gas sector, and there was a very particular important case because due to that, we had the result of the Constitutional Court decision, and that's Manzano. Manzano case was also banned, Manzano project was also banned by the community. So after many incongruent decisions between the Constitutional Court and the Consejo de Estado, because we had two courts that issue decision regulating these topics in Colombia. Finally, in 2018, we had a final decision that says, so local communities cannot ban the execution of projects. Therefore, there has to be an allocation of powers, a distribution or allocation of power between the national government, who is the owner of the resources, and the territories, the local authorities, who has the power to regulate how the territory will be ordered. We are now in the process of having that law that we call the concurrence and consultation enacted. And that purpose of that law will seek to have a mechanism for the nation, local territories to have an agreement and how to pursue those activities that are of national interest. So after that, we have to have the reform of the royalty, that is 2020, September 2020, in order to continue having that local community support. The government, among other reasons, including corruption, retains projects because of the methodology that the royalty system 2011 provided. So the main change into 2020 royalty reform is that royalties for producing regions pass from 11% to 25%. What we believe, and the government believe, is that it increasing the revenue distribution to those producing areas will benefit and will obtain the local support, and therefore that legitimacy that the oil and gas sector is looking.
Thank you very much, Marianna. Jorge, going back a bit on the something that Marianna said triggered me, going back to the M&A activity. Could you, since we have a big audience, we have more than 100 people interested in this and following, could you mention a bit description of the Ecopetrol process and the opportunity there, the agency, permanent open round, and now the League B, and third, the opportunities in the private sector? If you can just give a flavor of that, it would be useful.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. And I think it's a good question because
We are going away from the script that Jeremy gave us, but I think
not a
it's
problem.
been very productive. We have industry practitioners here, 3 of you. Raul knows risk, so I think this will be very educational for investors. So please, Jorge, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's another good example of how the country has developed multiple ways of investing in Colombia, because it's one of the few countries where the government has been able to hold regular bid rounds for different areas. It's a process that has worked very well. When I mentioned that the regulator is very imaginative, very progressive in the way of doing things, one of the changes that ANH introduced a way back is that it allows the companies to define the areas where they want to bid. That is called the open bid round. It's something that other countries, like in Brazil, they are starting to implement as well. And it's one of the examples in which companies can get a piece of action in Colombia.
And
so,
Neuquén has it in Argentina.
Yes, sir.
Really
yeah. Yes, yeah. So I think it's brilliant because instead of trying to understand and divide blocks or pieces of acreage and put that for bid, it really allows the companies to bid where they are interested. And it's working very, very well. It's very effective. Has been a great success in Colombia. So this is one of the processes that are ongoing. And this Friday, tomorrow, we are going to get bids under that way of participation. Then the other thing that is happening that I think is very, very important for Colombia, because it has been a process around this, is unconventionals. Probably we can talk more about that afterwards.
It's our next issue. Is that the next question?
Oh, okay. All right. But just to mention that there is another process ongoing. Basically, Colombia will have 4 pilots to explore for unconventionals, and companies has been already pre-qualified. And during November, the regulator ANH will receive offers from the companies, and by the end of November, probably they will assign blocks for these 4 pilots. It's a very important process in Colombia today. It's one more example of how Colombia does all the things on a very secure footage, in a solid foundation. It has been a long process, but it has been a very very positive process in order to get to this point. And last but not least, something that you also mentioned, and Tony mentioned as well, I believe, is that the national oil company, Ecopetrol, for the second time, has put for bid several of their assets in their portfolio. So there are 9 blocks that are under production that are a fantastic opportunity for companies that wanted to start businesses in Colombia or want to integrate their existing businesses with more production. So this is an ongoing process. Just today or yesterday, the president of Ecopetrol has announced that they expect to receive bids and produce the sale of these blocks before the end of the year. And this is another thing that is keeping, the wheels turning, because companies that has this opportunity of having a little bit of cash flow will be available to participate in exploration blocks and add additional activity into the industry. So I think that these 3 opportunities coming from the government are very important. At the same time, as I mentioned before, Colombia is always very active, very liquid in terms of opportunities. So we will see other transactions being closed before the end of the year. So far, I mentioned there has been 4, possibly 5 transactions, very important ones, over $10 million. The one that Tony is in the closing process is for $825 million. Is the biggest transaction in Colombia, at least in the last 5 years. So congratulations for that, Tony. And Colombia, in terms of M&A, is always very, very active and always very, very good news.
So for the institute, that we have been always big supporters of the Colombia energy sector, is a really very important to have the panel and to have Tony here, because last year we wouldn't be in a position to announce close to $1 billion transaction in Colombia, and this year is happening, and in a very bad year for oil, in a very bad year for humankind. So first, it shows Tony's and Glencore commitment to invest and to do the right thing, and second, shows that the Colombians have done something well done, because with all the uncertainties and all the risk, you are receiving such a world-class investment from such a world-class investor. So, and the small piece that we can do as a catalyzer, we feel very proud. And I move to the next thing, which goes to you, Raul, and to Tony. Raul, what do you think is the risk of the political situation stopping the framework for unconventional? Because moving into a pilot is not moving into unconventional production, and you have to compete for money. You have over 100 Chapter 11 impairment, where people welcome activity. So why would an investor go to a place where the owners of the resource are not still convinced then? So what is the risk of that thing being stopped? And to Tony is, do you believe today cost of production or forecast cost of production for unconventional in Colombia justify an effort to put Colombia in the unconventional map, or Colombia should focus in their conventional and offshore production? Go to Raul.
Thanks for the question. I'm going to leave the legal component to Marianna. She has a better sense of also the inclinations of a number of judges in Colombia. But from the political perspective, I think there is a big risk that you are going to have an unwillingness by various political actors to allow, say, unconventionals to move forward, if you will, slightly more seamlessly. It doesn't mean that it will be immediately stopped completely. I think it's just going to be a very slow slog, and particularly because, as we've seen, there is no clear segment of the political class in this country that is willing to go out to bat for fracking. There just isn't. This is a government right now in power that sees fracking as very controversial, and that has shown no clear intent and capability to actually, go and promote the benefits of extractives, promote the need for, unconventionals, but just extractives in general. And so when you don't have that level of support at the highest levels of government, it's tricky. It's difficult. It's not impossible. You have to keep working at it, but it can be sometimes discouraging. And the other component is that not only do you have that problem with the government right now, but future governments, if a moderate left comes into power, you still have a lot of folks in the moderate left that have issues with extractives in general, and unconventional. So, I think that's an issue. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done from the part of companies in engaging with different actors, in education, in promoting the ideas of the benefits of unconventional and extractives in general, the importance to the economy, to local development, because the other side of the coin, the anti-extractive side of the camp, if you will, has been extremely effective with its campaigning.
Thank you very much. Tony, we go to you.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to say is I have not looked at unconventionals in Colombia, honestly, in any detail whatsoever. I mean, clearly in a technical sense, there is the potential, and that's been well documented over many years. But But I do think that politically it is quite difficult, and it would require an enormous amount of political capital to be spent by someone, a group of politicians, a group of political leaders, to unlock the opportunity. And I don't see that happening, frankly. I just don't see it happening. And what I would observe is there is a lot of conventional opportunities left to develop in Colombia. So it seems unlikely to me that it'll become a major part of the Colombian oil and gas space anytime soon, actually.
I tend to agree with Tony. I will share briefly the Argentinian experience. The Vaca Muerta formation ran through Neuquén and Mendoza, ran through two provinces. In Neuquén, there are 1,500 wells producing, unconventional wells producing from Vaca Muerta. In Mendoza, there are 7. The 7 in Mendoza, we drill it, so we really know it. In theory, it is permitted in both provinces. The difference is the Neuquén population knows that they pay their salaries, school, teachers, doctors, with money coming from the oil. They are very strict in environmental. There is no corruption in the government, and you can exercise the industry. You can work there, you can produce, you can sell the oil, you can ship it, export, it works. In Mendoza, there's no corruption. The last 2 governments have been totally transparent. They say they want the activity. They pass rules to do the activity, and you cannot do it. The only 7 wells, we have drilled the wells, so we know. And it's the same formation. The political separation is artificial, has 150 years. The formation has 40 million years. So it's all above. Everything is on the surface. And it requires totally determined political leadership. Somebody has to wear the shirt of unconventional, has to lead, and has to be, quoting Tony, committed to spend political capital. It's going to be a dream. Moving from a pilot to commercial production is a long way. It's a long way. So I think the center-right politicians in Colombia have to make their mind. They cannot be both. They cannot be left and center-right. They have to make a decision. If they don't want to be, they should not mislead the industry, because the resources will be very productive in conventional offshore. And if they want to do unconventional, somebody has to lead. Orphan attractive projects never get to live. They should have somebody leading. The orphan project, you don't build this bottom up. It has to be built top down. So sorry, but painful experience from Argentina. Same for mining. San Juan, 12 billion in mining. Chubut, almost 0. Same resources, same country, same constitution. So Colombia has to make their mind vis-a-vis this. With this, we are more or less have covered.
Yeah, if I may, I want to react just a second on that. I think that there is a factor that is coming that will help for this to develop as an additional opportunity in Colombia. And the fact is that the national reserves, both for oil and gas, are declining in Colombia. I believe it's less than 6 years for oil and less than 9 years for natural gas. Colombia is one of the, after Argentina, is one of the countries in Latin America that has natural gas as a big component of their energy matrix. So yes. Colombia really, consumes and uses a lot of gas every day. I think that because of the what happened in other countries as well, producing natural gas from the shales is something that is more doable than thinking oil, and it's something that is readily available in Colombia. So I fully agree.
100% agree with you. I think you will get the cheap fracking equipment in the US, and you have the highly qualified team from the US, and it's a long tradition of US professionals working in Colombia. So all the ingredients are there, but the decision has to be made at the political level.
Exactly, and probably this decline in national reserves is something that eventually will do the trick, because instead of importing LNG from the US or from other countries, I argue that there is a huge advantage for Colombia on developing their own resources.
Well, with this, we will bring it back to Jeremy. The last word just to congratulate again Tony Hayward and Glencore for what they have decided. This is the Institute of the Americas about, so we are very proud and very grateful of having you here today. Jeremy, it goes to you now.
Well, okay, now back to, so I would like to have Marianna comment on the same question of fracking. I think there was an issue, as particularly Raul mentioned about some of the ins and outs with the judicial, the Consejo. So Marianna, if you would please, and then I'll get some audience questions here going.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. This is a long story, but I'm trying to summarize and wrap up for you. Regulations in unconventional resources have existed in Colombia since 2012. And that is something that is important to point out. It is not something new that Colombia is trying to carry out first. So in 2018, what happened is in 2018, because of the social, political, and environmental efforts against the oil and gas industry, the main regulations, technical regulations for the development of exploration and conventional projects in Colombia were suspended by the court. So the government, as soon as Duque came into the position as president, he designated a commission to analyze whether the execution of unconventional resources in Colombia has a positive impact in the economy, in the communities, and the environment, and everything. So that commission that, by instance, the president of the National Hydrocarbon Agency was part. The current president of the National Hydrocarbon Agency was part of that commission. That commission rendered a report, and that report was pro unconventional resources. So that was supposed to be the step necessary to start carrying out the process. However, decisions, again, courts in Colombia are very active, and that's important to also let the audience know. So courts again decided it's not enough. We need an additional report, and a new report was asked to the Universidad Nacional. That report took additional time, and the decision of that report was that pilot projects were needed to actually assess the real impact, both for the community and in the environment, in the seismicity and many factors that, the fracking is known about. So after a report was rendered, so the court decided that yes, we in Colombia can carry out pilot projects in order to have that assess made. And we are now in the process to have those pilot projects allocated that have certain standards. As Jorge had said, it's only four projects that are able to be developed, and in very specific areas. And let's see what happened. We are just in the process, and that's one of the bidding process that the National Hydrocarbon Agency is carrying out under specific contracts that are already subject to discussion and by the public. And the contracts are called, we refer to them as SEPI, so the Special and Conventional Resources. That's the long history made short from a legal point of view. Thank you.
No, that's very helpful. I mean, I think it obviously points to just how complex, and I think what we've talked about so far here, and why folks maybe are emphasizing conventionals on panel so far. Tony, there's several questions here. Let me wrap a couple into one. Can you give a little bit of the flavor, sort of in as much as you can? I know a lot of it's private and confidential, but in as much as you can, share with the audience how you guys came to make that investment, how that deal happened. I mean, you outlined why you're very bullish on Colombia, but help us understand that deal in as much as you can publicly.
I'm not sure there's much I can add that I haven't already, actually. I mean, I do want to be clear, though, this is not Glencore, right? I've got two hats. I am the chairman of Glencore, but I also work with the private equity group Carlyle. They have an international energy arm based in London, and I work with the Carlyle team to identify primarily over the last few years, has been very much focused on Latin America. And we've always had a desire to do business in Colombia. We think it's a good place to do business. A few years ago, we bought a small Colombian oil and gas company, Colombia Energy Development Corp, which some of you will be aware of. We had always thought that the Oxy position was a great position. And as it became evident that Oxy was out of necessity and as a strategic reposition, exiting much of their international businesses, we engaged in the conversation. You know, as I said, I think we have a great business. I mean, the team is extremely good, incredibly professional, extremely well developed by Oxy over, you know, decades, frankly. The assets are very strong, well understood, a lot of opportunity to invest to grow production. And as I said, it's sort of full cycle. You've got everything from infill wells in Caña Limón and some of the satellites to appraisal satellite exploration activity in and around Caña Limón in the Northern Llanos. You've got a great, fantastic redevelopment opportunity with Acera Infantas, with Ecopetrol. You know, the Oxy and Ecopetrol have done a remarkable job there actually over the last 15 years of growing production from 5,000 barrels a day to north of 40,000 barrels a day. You know, this was the oldest oil field in Colombia, discovered in 1918. And it's now, you know, at a level of production that we haven't seen for over 3 decades. It's a great example of redevelopment, incremental production, enhanced recovery. And then, of course, the Putumayo Basin, which is obviously the place where the above ground challenges are the most significant today in Colombia. But with time, with careful work with the communities, I think we'll be able to move some things ahead there. So it is it's sort of the ultimate full cycle E&P company, as it's present in every hydrocarbon basin, bar the offshore. Oxy elected to keep their offshore interests, which probably is good for us. We were really focused on onshore. But it has a big presence in every basin, in the Northern Llanos, in the Middle Mag, and in Putumayo, and it has great opportunities across the cycle. So, and a fantastic team, 99.9% of which are Colombians, which is, you know, exactly what we will continue to do.
Wonderful. Thanks for let's launch the poll now, and then we'll come to Raul. But there's one. Let me quickly add this on to that, your nice summary there, Tony, and that is the competition for capital question. And I think you've answered this pretty clearly, but just to give you a chance to put the succinct exclamation mark on it. There are lots of developments that everyone on this session today understands are underway in Mexico and some other places that suggest that perhaps Colombia has an opportunity now to compete for some capital. So comment on that in the sort of competition for capital. I would suggest your deal and the Carlyle deal is an exclamation mark on what Colombia is doing for that competition for capital. But the age-old question of what can a sovereign do, and what's your thought on that, just to wrap this session?
Yeah, look, I think Colombia, as I said at the beginning, over decades has been an attractive country for foreign direct investment, not just in the oil and gas sector, but generally. You know, it's a member of OECD. It has, despite all the challenges, stable government, well-run fiscal management, you know, a sensible macroeconomic policy over many, many years. It's been a great credit to successive leadership that they've managed to keep, despite the challenges in Colombia, the sort of macro fiscal policies in a sensible way. We've not seen the dramatic swings that we've seen in Argentina and Brazil and in Mexico. It's always been sort of center ground, both politically and in a sort of macroeconomic sense. That continues. That makes it a very attractive macro investment proposition. And then a level beneath that, a long track record, as I said, value creation in the oil and gas sector. there have been a whole raft of independent oil and gas companies that have come to Colombia and created a lot of value. And we didn't see that changing. I mean, I think the challenge of capital in the sector is, of course, a different one. It's quite scarce today, and that's probably not going to change. So the playing field has got much more competitive because there is simply less capital in the sector. You go back to when I was running BP, 20% of the S&P was oil and gas. Today, it's less than 4%. So, the capital that's available in the sector, be it equity capital or debt capital, is much less, and we all understand the reasons for that. So it's a much more competitive playing field, but I can continue to believe that Colombia is very well placed to compete and do very well in what is a shrinking pool of capital, frankly.
Right. No, that the S&P numbers is quite astonishing. Thanks for that. So let's talk a little bit. We've got the poll here. We'll wrap this in a minute, but a question specifically for you, Raul, about pipelines and the security of the most strategic pipelines in Colombia, resurgent attacks on Caño Limón and Coveñas. Talk about that a little bit from your risk mapping and what you would see in that regard.
Yeah, no, I think the primary actor that essentially is responsible for these attacks is the ELN. And the ELN is a group with which this government certainly has shown no inclination to establish any sort of rapport or dialogue. In fact, quite the contrary. And so, from the point of view of the established political class, liberal democracy reaching out to an illegal group and sort of bringing them into the fold and sort of deactivating them in that way, that doesn't seem to be a possibility. So in our view, the ELN will continue to be a threat. Now, also from the military perspective, we haven't seen a government that has been assertive enough in sort of pushing these groups back and preventing them from growing. So again, from a military perspective, there is a challenge there. And finally, the ELN is the primary armed group that derives revenue from illegal gold mining in Venezuela, in cahoots with the military there and the government there, and also seeks refuge in Venezuela. So as long as Venezuela remains a near failed state, you are going to see FARC dissidents, and particularly the ELN, gain advantage by seeking refuge there and getting revenue there to empower themselves in Colombia. Now, if a new government comes in, which is more willing to find ways to work with the group, that might change. But given how strong this group remains and is likely to become, I would say there are risks that this type of activity against oil infrastructure in certain areas will continue. Yes.
Okay, so we'll come back. If folks take the chance to vote on the we got the polling results, but let me ask Marianna a question really quick, and I'll come back to you, Raul, to comment on the audience result, the polling results from the audience. Marianna, there's a specific question about the Escazú agreement in the oil and gas industry, where that stands in Colombia with its approval, the possible approval at the congressional level. Is there anything you could add, or I could open it up to anyone else, but let me start with you, Marianna. This question specifically about the Escazú agreement and what that means vis-a-vis Colombia.
The Escazú agreement is one of the main commitments and environmental level from Colombia, for Colombia. And it's in the process to be approved in the Congress. Since there is certain issues going on and pros and contra and the Congress because of the content of the agreement. But the truth is that we already have strong environmental regulations in Colombia. And this, in my opinion, the Escazú agreement brings more protection and at the level of creating the environmental courts and the protection for the social leaders. That is the main point of the caution in the Congress. It's not related to oil and gas projects or mining projects. It's an issue more related to social and political matters. What is delaying the approval of the Escazú agreement? That's what will be my opinion. Perhaps some of my co-panelists will have an additional comment or different opinion.
Sure,
I
Jorge,
fully agree with Marianna. I think it's a very important step for Colombia into that. And I think another good example is that in the recent change in the distribution of royalties in Colombia, I think that for the first time, the government has got 5% into environmental actions. So I think it's another good signal of how Colombia is building over, very solid foundations. And obviously, it's a country where the environment is beautiful, and we want to keep it that way, right?
There's a follow-on question I'll come back to. Tony, did you want to jump in before we go to the poll here and I get Raul to weigh in? Do you have any thoughts on this Escazú agreement? Okay. So Raul, here's the poll. So the question we asked everyone was, how concerned are you about the risk of confrontation with communities and social groups, ranked on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most concerned. So 49% of the audience came in at a 4. So I would say on the higher side of concern. 32% come in at a 5. So obviously very concerned. You could basically 22% is between 1 and 3. So you've got 70% of our audience here today suggesting they're very concerned about confrontation. I'll start with you, Raul, and suggest, how do we manage this? Because this is what we want to talk about today, is social risk management. So if 70% of the audience is concerned, how do we allay that concern, and what do we do as an industry, community, and government representatives?
Yeah, no, I see your point. I think what's important here is to make sure that we interpret the headline right? I mean, this concern doesn't need to mean it's paralyzing, or it should even make us think about whether we've made the right choice investing in Colombia. Not at all. I think that it just suggests that people rightly consider this an issue that needs to be addressed and mitigated in the most responsible way possible. And I think that what that means is that companies need to essentially study very closely the communities that surround their activity, map out the various actors to get a sense of who is the most important counterpart they need to engage with when it comes to NGOs, when it comes to communities, when it comes to social leaders, mayors, etc. I mean, that constant engagement, having an engagement strategy is paramount. I think that's very, very important. And then, of course, I mean, there's a security component in sort of the best way to protect your people and your assets from sort of any protest, disruption, violent activity. That's also another component that one has to keep in mind. And potential scenarios of how things conceivably could go awry, and make sure that you're prepared for, say, the most likely or the most high impact potential scenarios. I think if you do that, you can sleep well at night, if you will. And that's the important thing. And you're also being responsible about how you engage with communities that might not have all the information. So I think those are needed steps when thinking about social risk in Colombia.
Jeremy, if I may add something to Raul that comes from personal experience. We have an investment in E&P in Colombia, in Interoil, one of the major investors in Interoil. Interoil is a junior, small, medium size. The risk is manageable. I think that's the phrase that came from Tony, and I think that is a very good brief explanation of risk in Colombia. The risk is manageable because the rule of law works. So the risk is manageable because you have rule of law. You can predict the outcomes because there is a rule of law. You read the rules, you can predict the outcome. We have had community issues. We solve it through engagement, through listening, talking to local authorities, talking to the local native people, having the real engagement. We solve it. We had a problem with the block that we inherited, that it was in the middle of a residential area, and the guys were very rich, very influential, so we never were able to access the place. And we went into litigation with the agency. We had arbitration. The arbitration was ruled. Government accepted the arbitration. So there is rule of law. There is rule of law. So you ask me what we think. Okay, we are not the size of Canada, we're much smaller, but we are looking on the Ecopetrol asset. We are looking in other private opportunities in the middle of a $40 price that is sustained on a fragile political agreement of OPEC plus in the middle of a pandemic. So for sure, there is something that Colombia does well. There is no doubt there is something that Colombia does well. If not, we wouldn't be, let's say, maybe we're stupid. We're in love because we are Latin. But Carlyle is entering with almost $1 billion. So there is something that Colombia does well.
You know, Tony, I think you alluded to this in your opening, you know, the role of the company leadership, right? I mean, I think not to put words back in your mouth, but the leadership should focus on these issues above ground. The senior management should focus, that's where they should dedicate their time and effort, while the geologists and drilling engineers focus below ground, right? So any further thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, look, the key to success is, as everyone has said in Colombia, is managing the above ground risks locally. They're not regional, or they're sort of sub-regional. You have to manage the communities. You have to build strong relationships with the communities. You have to do that by investing time and money into the communities to build their capability and build working relationships with them. And many companies in Colombia have done that very successfully for many years. And you know, I would say that Occidental is one of the prime examples of exactly that. They've done some extraordinary things in Urrutia, which is obviously one of the more challenging jurisdictions given its location adjacent to the Venezuelan border. And they've been very successful in managing their communities in the right way, which has been good for the communities, good for Colombia, and good for Occidental. And I think there are, you know, plenty of examples of that across Colombia.
Excellent. Marianna, any final thoughts on that? And then I want to switch to ESG. Not that we're
Nothing to add in that respect.
Okay. So there's several questions I'll sort of roll up and we'll start with you, Jorge. There's several questions about the role of ESG. How should ESG fit in the national level in Colombia, but also at the company level in Colombia? So, you know, at Sproule, what are you advising clients? Obviously, we're talking about Colombia today, but you can give a little more general. And then part of it also was what is Colombia doing on this at a national level vis-a-vis Paris Agreement and in climate action? So there's a lot in there, but let's summarize it as, you know, national climate and ESG, and then at the company level. So what are your thoughts on that? And then I'll go back to the rest of the panel as well to weigh in, and we'll start to wrap up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. ESG is one of the critical success factors for the industry today. So I cannot imagine any company not taking a lot of attention to that. And in Colombia in particular, as you mentioned, the country and the government has taken multiple steps in order to be part of the forefront of the requirements for more transparency in the operations and in reporting. I think that that is tailoring a lot of different actions in Colombia that are paying off. We mentioned this concern about the social unrest and environmental concerns in Colombia. Part of that is being addressed by the government by doing a more effective and transparent availability of information in Colombia in general. It's one of the countries where information is really available and is available to everybody. That doesn't mean that people with the same information may have two different opinions, right? But I think that these steps are again, things that the government are doing in order to build over a solid foundation for the future. And this is a very different approach from what we see in other governments in Latin America. You know that there is a whole movement by the main international companies reviewing their reserves in terms of these social factors. There is even an United Nations framework. This is not very well known, but Colombia is one of the countries that is evaluating this framework, the United Nations framework, in order to book reserves and resources. And this is a framework where for the first time, the environment and the social factors are taken into consideration, along with the geological and production factors as well. So again, it's a very good example where Colombia is at the forefront of actions in order to not only make the information available, but also taking the right actions to secure a future in oil and gas for many, many more years.
Great, thank you. Marianna, do you want to add anything, particularly, again, you're our lawyer on the panel. Give us some legal advice on the...
I'll give you a legal advice. But first, Colombia is a landmass opportunity. We are located in Latin America. We're the third largest producer in Latin America. And this is a country where the rule of law exists, where there is continuous democracy efforts. And that is something that's quite important to point out, because we know, being in this industry, that choosing a place where you can enjoy that is quite different, because resources are not generally located in countries where you can enjoy those benefits. So having said that, we have a strong framework, contractual framework, and strong, very international level positioning. We have strong regulations and oil and gas development and the environmental side. We have challenges as any country where these activities are being carried out. And I would say the main challenge from a legal point of view are those related with people, with communities. So prior consultation related to ethnic communities, of course, because there have been also changes and by means of court decisions in the scope of where prior consultation is. And that can be a long discussion again. And the other point is the popular consultations that are not allowed anymore, but still we can move to social license. And it's something that is very, very in place right now in Colombia, as is in the rest of the world, in particular in Latin America, as we can see. That will be, so my main advice is choose the right partner, quite important. It is important to do business in Colombia. Choose the right partner so that someone you choose knows the territory, knows how to do the business in Colombia, pay into consideration the social matters, and they comply with environmental law. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, choose your hat, Glencore, Carlisle, and talk about ESG and how it fits into
well, I think, let me sort of go outside of Colombia. If you're in resources today and you want to attract capital, be it equity capital or debt capital, you have to be able to hold out an exemplary track record in ESG. If you can't do that, you will not attract capital. It's sort of as simple as that. There may be some other pools of capital that are less worried about that, but if you want Western institutional capital to invest in your business, then you better be able to demonstrate that you're taking care of in a real, transparent, substantive way ESG. And if you cannot, you will not be able to attract capital.
That's very succinct, and that's excellent. Thank you. Raul, I want your thoughts on this to start to wrap up, but let me ask you a very specific question from the audience as well. The likelihood of a hard left or moderate left victory in the next presidential election in Colombia, and any thoughts on that, if it has an impact? Yeah, we'll come back to easy questions for the rest of the panel as well after this one. Did we lose Raul? Yeah,
Oh,
I
hello?
hit him with that hard question. And yeah, okay, you're back. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. No, I was going to say, you know, obviously, so far, we've seen that the moderate left seems to be gaining sort of political capital, if you will. I mean, not only do you have the Bogota mayor, but you know, I still am not discounting the more populist side of the spectrum, essentially Petro. If I had to bet, and maybe throw in my wishful thinking in there, I would say we would hope that if the left comes to power, it is a more sort of reasonable one. But it's still early. I mean, obviously, we're more than a year away. It's you know, it's going to take some time. But I think the important thing as an investor and as a company operating in Colombia is to keep an eye on sort of the major or the key faces in the left, and also keep an eye on Petro and see how the left is evolving in the spaces it's gaining, because it is now in a very sort of advantageous position to potentially win in the next election. I mean, that's all I can say right now because it's too early. I don't want to sound like I'm copping out, but that's really the reality.
It seems that there is a trend in Latin America that there are no president has been re-elected, right? In the recent
anti-incumbency.
Yes.
I think the political scientists like our friend Francisco Monaldi, who asked that question, calls it the anti-incumbency. The pink wave, pink tide. No, it's an anti-incumbency. So fair enough. Well, thank you, Raul, for not squirming too badly on that one. So let's wrap up here. There's a couple questions I'm going to synthesize into our final speed round here of wrap-up questions. And Jose Luis, you're going to be involved in this as well. So there was a question about outlook for oil production, oil exports in Colombia. But what I'd like to do is really put everyone's feet to the fire here with one question that asks you for a projection on the number of production by year 2025. So I'd like you each to say, what do you think Colombia's production target will be, or what you'll be seeing in 2025? And then the other question is, in the La Jolla conference in May, we had a presentation from Armando Zamora, the head of ANH. And one of the things he talked a lot about was the government and their efforts to solve the transportation. So the moving of the product issue that's very famous. Everyone in this session knows about. So the question then on that is, has Colombia solved at this point the transportation, or is it on the way to solving the transport question? Yes or no? So, all right, Raul, because we had you on the spot already, you're still the hot seat. Production number 2025, what's Colombia going to be producing? And then has the transport question been solved?
Wow, that's a tricky one.
We lost him again.
It's interesting. Raul's connection seems to freeze up on these tough questions. All right, Jorge, we'll go to you then.
Okay. In terms of the crystal ball, I would say around 850,000 barrels per day, which is more than today, but it's counting on the compensation of the natural declines of the different fields in Colombia. So Colombia typically has been exporting 50% of their production, and I think that they will continue doing that. In terms of the transport, that is a really tricky one because it has been one of the pending issues in Colombia for a long time. I think that there are multiple actions taking place. Just this week, something has been announced in terms of natural gas. So I think that yes, Colombia finally understood that there is a problem there and it will be solved.
Excellent. All right, Marianna, 2025, and yes or no on transport?
I tend to agree with Jorge in respect to numbers. I think that will depend on because it's a safe bet. First, and second, because it'll depend how Colombia handles the efforts to renew exploratory investments, because we have to grow the reserves in order to see how the production will be in 2025. So it sounds a reasonable number to me, and that's why I go with Jorge in that respect. And thank you, Jorge. And in respect to transportation, well, we had to build more transportation pipelines. That's quite important because if we are going to increase production, we need a means to transport those productions. But in addition, we had to deal with the issue of the price, the fee, the transportation fee, that, as you know, is an issue that is on the head of the Ministry of Mine and Energy and has been solved by private negotiations between transporters and operators. But as that is private transportation, is still a discussion open between transporters and operators and trying to reach an agreement that is fair and satisfactory for all of them.
So I will put you down for not yet. And that question. Jose Luis, production number. Thank you, Marianna. Great to see you. Jose Luis, and you can't say 850,000 barrels.
No. I would say
Those two questions for you.
It will relate to the election. It will relate to the election. Next door, we've seen the historic major value destruction in an oil company. We saw a company going from 3 million barrels to 380,000. So it will depend on the election. And all that before the US sanction. Before the US sanction, they already managed to go from 3 million to 1.2. So it's if the political system use their freedom to choose a leftist government, which is a total right of the citizens, and the government has the maturity, the emotional maturity to respect the professionals that work at Ecopetrol and that work at the private company and that work at the agency, the country can have a leftist government and keep producing oil. If the political system invade an already well-working industry and politize it, there is only one lesson learned in South America: production goes down. This is like soccer. You count the goals. If you do the wrong policy, production goes down. So I cannot answer. You tell me the result of the election, then we have to see the new government, what the government does. The government believes the oil industry is an asset or is a target for easy dollars. If it is an asset to produce sustainable dollars, it may stay between 750 and 900. If it is a target for easy dollars to be distributed fast, it will go down, 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 down.
In transport, yes or no?
Transport is a real problem in a country where you pay
solved?
$20 to move oil in a truck that is run by friends of militaries, or you pay $3 to get the gas into a pipeline. It's a real problem. So they better deal with that. They will have to break some eggs, but they have to deal with that.
So I'll put you down. I'll put you down for 900,000 barrels a day and no on transport. Okay.
So you
all right, Tony.
You're gonna have a modern government that will not interfere in Ecopetrol.
Over to you.
Okay.
Less than 2019, not because of politics, but because of the level of capital investment. People are going to take 2 or 3 years to get back to the level of investment of last year, and that means that production will continue to slide, not dramatically, but it will be marginally lower than it was last year, and no on the pipelines.
Raul will finish. Thank you, Tony. We'll end where we began. Thank you, Jose Luis. Thank you for Integra sponsorship. Thank you, Raul, for control risk support on this. Answer those 2 questions. We've got 2 minutes, and then we're wrapping up.
Oh, me. Okay. So can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Good. So originally, I guess I was far too optimistic. I had thrown 1 million barrels out there, so that was far too optimistic.
That's okay.
Right there.
We're putting you down for it.
And I thought I was being negative. And on the pipeline now.
Well, the 1 million barrels has always been an interesting target there in Colombia, right? So good. We'll put you down for that. On the transport question?
Oh, no. No.
Okay. Well, there we go. We have, we've got 1 minute to spare. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank again Raul Gallegos and Jorge Milanese, Marianna Boza, Tony Hayward, Jose Luis Manzano. Thank you everyone who joined us today. This is, I've certainly enjoyed listening and sharing some thoughts here. Obviously, there is huge opportunity. We've emphasized that. We've talked about the challenges, most recently the pipeline and transport question that the government will continue, I think, to address. We'll stay tuned on the election front, and please stay tuned for the Institute of the Americas' upcoming programs. We are dotting the I's and crossing the T's on a virtual Argentina session for December, and we will see you all again very soon online. Thank you for joining us. Thanks again to the panel. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.